So welcome to the May meeting of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, commonly known as the BPAC. For those that are new to the meeting, the purpose of the advisory committee is to bring experts and interested parties together to educate one another, share best practices, and discuss issues and topics related to bicycle and pedestrian safety, planning, and project development. There's also an opportunity for regional collaboration and coordination for all activities involving active transportation. Committee membership is composed of one appointed representative from each of the transportation providers in the Dallas-Fort Worth metropolitan area, as well as one representative from each local government represented on the RTC. In addition to appointed members of the VPAC, anyone from the public and other interested parties are welcome and encouraged to attend and participate in VPAC meetings. Please note the meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the VPAC website. BPAC meetings are held quarterly, and while today's meeting is virtual, we do anticipate later this year the meetings will again return to the Transportation Council room at the COG offices in Arlington. COG staff will be using the attendees tracking tool in Microsoft Teams to take roll. Attendance is recorded for each agency, and this information is provided annually to the Surface Transportation Technical Committee. Please stick around to the end of the meeting to hear about upcoming funding opportunities for active transportation infrastructure. Previous BPAC meeting presentations and resources are available on the BPAC webpage at nctcog.org/BPAC. For more information about the BPAC and regional bicycle and pedestrian planning activities in North Texas, please feel free to contact any of the COG staff members who are in attendance at today's meeting, or visit the website nctcog.org/bikeped. Quick reminder of virtual meeting etiquette for all of us. We are all guilty at times of multitasking during webinars and online sessions. So I encourage us all to set aside all distractions for the next 2 hours and focus on the presentations. Please stay muted during the meeting unless you're contributing to the discussion, in which case you can click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Those of you joining by phone can press *6 to unmute yourselves. COG staff will also be monitoring the chat box for any comments and questions. If you do not want to interrupt a presenter, please have a specific question. You can type your question in the chat box or click on the raised hand icon and you'll be given the floor during the Q&A. Later in the meeting, we will be showcasing TxDOT's active transportation plan inventory submission portal, and we need assistance from all of you to upload your local trails and bikeway plans. To participate and submit your active transportation plans along with us, you will need the following on hand for submission: plan name and the URL, year of adoption, a link to the plan's GIS portal if available, and a description of the plan. Please be prepared to have this information ready and available to upload online within the next hour. And I have done this, it's pretty easy, so I encourage anyone that can provide this. I am Robert Caskey with the City of Frisco, and I'm your BPAC chair this year. And then I'll ask our vice chair to introduce himself.
Hey everybody, Chad Marbett, representing the City of Weatherford, co-chair.
Thank you, Chad. First order of business is review of the summary from the February 16th, 2022 meeting. Are there any corrections? All right, the summary of the February 16th meeting is accepted as submitted. All right, moving on to our first presenter. The North Texas region is home to many colleges and universities, both big and small, and they are important trip generators to the communities served by members of BPAC. How can colleges and universities improve bicycling and walking on campus, and how can agencies partner with them to coordinate active transportation to the campus? The first presentation will be provided by Gary Koch and Ian Siemens with the University of Texas at Dallas, which is located in Richardson. All right, turn it over to y'all.
Hello, thank you for having me. My name is Gary Cockey. I'm the Director of Sustainability at UT Dallas, and my role here is I'm going to really be setting the stage for Ian, who is an eco rep in the Office of Sustainability, and he is our leader for our bicycle-friendly university efforts at UTD. To set the stage, though, I'd like to briefly define sustainability and what that means in higher education. So Our office's scope of work is operational, so we report through facilities and economic development. That gives us some direct influence over infrastructure related to cycling and pedestrians. But our scope of work is also academic. We work with the provost office on curriculum, research office for research, student affairs for student engagement. We have several roles as leaders in our community for sustainability. And then we work with faculty for our sustainability committee on policy issues. So given the nature of our role on campus, it makes us a natural advocate for partnering with municipal governments, bringing student voices around issues like cycling, and connecting the dots in ways that are sometimes difficult to do without that central advocate at the university to lead the conversation with the external partners. We also really find a lot of value in certification programs that can drive progress on campus and engage students in the work that we're leading. We have a bicycle friendly university certification, which was recognition, but also really instrumental in us finding baseline information about where we are and where we can improve. We have similar programs for Tree Campus Higher Education, which also has the Tree City certification. We have B Campus USA certification, which has B City certification. So those are intentional to foster that overlap. And we found that as an effective way to drive change both on campus and to foster collaborations externally too. But with that, I'll introduce Ian Siemens. He is an eco-rep in the Office of Sustainability, a graduate student interested in urban planning and the real force behind our bicycle-friendly university efforts.
Thank you, Gary. So to start off with, I'll just go over very briefly what the purpose of the bicycle-friendly program is and kind of the scope and how it fits in. So it is a program that is administered by by the League of American Bicyclists, and it's part of the Bicycle Friendly America program. So this applies also to, there is a business version and there is a version for cities. I know that many of the individuals on this call have cities that are members. And all of these different programs are based around these 5 E's of equity, engineering, education, encouragement, and evaluation. So I can kind of get into those a little bit more in just a moment. And the reporting period is every 4 years. And something that I really think is valuable about the program is that it is a program that emphasizes these connection points between different agencies and also other stakeholders. You can move on to the next slide. So, like with a lot of certification programs, it helps create a roadmap for the organization and set standards of where we would like to be in the future. It is a really good method of kind of creating this path from one level to another level and giving these different areas specific names that we can then communicate to, say, university administration and say the reason why we are advocating for these policies is because it is on our path towards, in our instance, silver status. So it has this ability to spur action inside of our community, which works well with our sustainability office, like Gary said, is this kind of connector and internal advocate. And you can move to the next slide. So as part of this program, these are some of the things that we've done here at UTD. We have a bicycle-friendly advisory committee, and this is kind of integral to all of the different bicycle-friendly programs. And it also involves a lot of outreach to stakeholders. So that is to the city that we are in, that is also to students on campus that are cyclists, all of that kind of stuff. And then we also have a large portion of the program dedicated to programming, so encouragement and education. So that can be things like maintenance clinics or a bike to campus day or a bicycle safety program, that kind of thing. And we also can kind of act as a center for data collection and analysis in our area. So that would be like how many bicycle accidents are occurring and what is causing those bicycle accidents, that kind of thing. And otherwise, that information is a little bit difficult to come by and is often not kind of siloed out on its own. And we can motivate and lead new programs and policies. So for instance, we're currently working on a small scale kind of demonstration project for a bike share program at our university based around our surplus bikes, because as a university, we have a lot of students that are just leaving their bikes here. So it would be great if we could repurpose those as kind of a bike share program for students. And you can move to the next slide. So kind of coming back to North Central Texas Council of Governments, this is a really great motivator and connector for working with local governments. So for instance, we are currently, one of our main initiatives working with local governments is participating in Richardson's active transportation plan, which we'll hear more about later today. So for that, for instance, we've done a lot of student outreach with creating little flyers. We have invited Richardson to place a lot of their signs on campus to kind of have all of those little surveys that students can fill out. So we've had a good amount of student involvement in filling out these surveys. And we also can kind of help shift the priorities of the active transportation plan, or specifically highlight areas that we know are issues. And that is kind of this hyperlocal knowledge of saying like, well, we have individuals that are talking to us about a specific little area that otherwise might not get the kind of information and care that it needs otherwise. So we can kind of act as like an aggregator of the needs of students that otherwise wouldn't be speaking actively to the active transportation plan. And we, like a lot of organizations, we facilitate all of the end of trip facilities. So as part of an active transportation plan, you would be providing, all of the intermediaries of how they get here. And then obviously we have to provide all of the things like bike parking, showers, all of that kind of thing. So being able to kind of work together on those things is kind of critical to make sure that people are not only able to get there, but also want to go there. And I think that we have a couple minutes left for questions. And either Gary or myself can answer those.
And to supplement as well, in addition to the efforts that Ian's gone through, the lessons that I've learned through this is we've been able to convene a bunch of the stakeholders that were very interested in aspects of cycling, theft prevention, bicycle safety, access, that had worked in silos previously, and bring them together through this committee. And so there was a lot of interest that was really in need of an advocate and a structure in which to work. And so internally, having this BFU committee to curate that conversation and to bring student voices was really valuable. And then with that, that allows us to better work externally with partners as well. I know that Ian has referenced the ATP, which we collaborate with Richardson on. We also participate in the City of Richardson Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, several COG working groups, and then our facilities management leadership meets monthly with City of Richardson, a traffic engineer, to discuss, the upcoming events that might affect our roads surrounding campus, and with that, pedestrians and cyclists as well. And so the overarching lesson that we have is the structure for communication, both internally and externally, was desperately needed to bring all of the people that were already working and interested in this space into communication with one another. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Looks like we've
I
got
have a
one.
question. This is David, I work in the Fort Worth district, but I was curious, did you say you were looking at a program to, my understanding is to take these bikes that were apparently left by students and give them to somebody else or make them available to somebody else?
Yeah, that's correct, basically. So normally we have a lot of bikes that go to surplus that are auctioned off. And so that's a great opportunity for us to actually be able to fix up some of those bikes and be able to provide them to students for things like, in the small case that we're looking at initially is just for events and that kind of thing, because funnily enough, we get a lot of people asking us, like, oh, I want to attend this bike tour, but I don't have a bike. So that kind of thing initially.
Yeah, I'd help out with some of those efforts on the Fort Worth side. Just as quick suggestion, if I might, it's kind of a challenge because it's got the bike has to fit the rider and there's a lot of variation. I've heard there's somebody in Dallas that does a similar thing. You might contact them. They might be able to provide some information about that, but um, maybe I should confine my comments to that for now. I think it's Spokes for Folks or something like that.
You know what? I did see something like that just recently. And yeah, I think that they had a big event just a couple of weeks ago. And yeah, I haven't reached out to them yet, but yeah, that's a great example of something very similar.
Yeah, and just as a cautionary thing, experientially, I mean, most people are glad to get these things, and we have a lot of recipients that get these things. There is abuse, though, and you need to consider that when you're, making bikes available for people at no cost. That without some kind of reasonable stuff, you're going to see a lot of them in pawn shops, which is probably not your goal.
Yeah, absolutely. There's quite a few university programs with similar bike share programs that we're kind of modeling ours off of. And having it be just students helps a lot because we already have all of their information and know where they live. So that helps.
And luckily too, as we pursue this, we've been making the bikes available through surplus at a fee for a number of years now. And so the process for collecting bikes and making them available won't be new. It will just be the way that we get those to students that need a bike that we'll need to concentrate on. I believe I see a hand icon up, but I can't see who it is. So feel free to just unmute if you have a question.
That's good. I was just doing that. This is Jennifer with Fort Worth Bike Sharing, and I would be more than happy to talk to you about some of the best practices we've developed. And we may be doing kind of a different type of bike sharing or a different way to check out, but we certainly have had our fair share of strange situations and scenarios. But we do a lot of work with the campuses here at TCU and at the Health Science Center. And they are some of our best customers, but we also have learned some things. So if you want to shoot me an email, I'd love to share with you what we do to help with some of those things that David was bringing up as concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys for taking the time to present.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Our next agenda items are the local community updates and accomplishments. Local community updates are short 5-minute presentations providing BPAC members an opportunity to learn about programs and projects happening around the region. If you are interested in presenting a local community update at the end of next BPAC meeting, please notify COG staff. First up, creating trail connections to colleges is one strategy to improve bicycle and pedestrian accessibility for students and staff wishing to travel to and from campus. The Julie Burgeon Trail in Arlington is an example of a project connecting to the University of Texas at Arlington. To provide an update on this topic is Mitali Mondlikar with the City of Arlington.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. This is Mitali Mandlikar. I'm landscape architect and park project manager with City of Arlington Parks and Recreation Department. My role here is to basically manage design and construction of varied park projects. That includes pocket parks, neighborhood parks, community parks, linear parks. We also do corridor projects, development projects, plaza projects, and more. So today I'm here to talk about Julia Bergen Linear Park development project, the phase 2 of this project. But before I get into the phase 2, I wanted to talk a little bit about this park, this linear park. So next slide, please. So for those of you who don't know where this park's located, Julia Bergen Park is located in the heart of Arlington, adjacent to the University of Texas in Arlington, very close to downtown, and it's along Johnson Creek Linear Park. Johnson Creek Linear Parkway basically connects multiple neighborhood parks, small parks, and pocket parks along Johnson Creek. And Julia Bergen Park is one such park located on Johnson Creek Greenway within the floodplain. A little bit of background on the park. This park was basically converted from a flooded neighborhood into a park development. The city basically wanted to preserve all of the land and all of the green belt areas along the Johnson Creek. And so the floodplain was converted into a park. Next slide, please. And so that's a closer view of the park. It kind of highlights and shows you the Julia Bergen Park itself. You can see that there are multiple parks along that Johnson Creek, within the Johnson Creek floodplain. And I've also highlighted the phase 2. But before I get into that, I want to jump in and talk a little bit about this park itself. So next slide, please. So this is a master plan that we had developed back in 2013-14 through public engagement process. We went through several public meetings to develop a park master plan for Julia Bergen Park. And as you can see, there are several trails. The goal here was to develop, off-street transportation alternative, hike and bike paths that would basically not only offer recreational options within the park, within the community, but also extend out to the community. And so we wanted to, our long-term goal was to provide not only an enhanced hike and bikeway system that would extend along Johnson Creek Linear Park, but also draw connections into adjacent residential neighborhoods, the university campus, and allow students, staff, alternative mode of transportation. So while also providing recreational opportunities. So you can see on here, there's obviously, this is a park master plan, and we had to phase it into multiple phases. The phase 1 development basically included building a parking lot that you can see in the center over there of the graphic, with a playground area for, playground equipment for 2 through 5 and 5 through 12, multiple age groups, several benches, pavilion, drinking fountain, bike rack. A portion of hike and bike trail system was also developed as a part of phase 1 development. And next slide, please. And those kind of shows you some of the photographs of phase 1 development that we were able to accomplish back in 2017. And so we built, this is a very successful park. I'd say it's very heavily used, not only by the university students, campus, the residential area, around it, anybody can walk to it. During the phase 1 development, I would say that we were able to construct also connections into and connecting to the existing sidewalk system. So making it really easy for people to be able to walk to the park if they wanted to. In places where there were sidewalks missing, we did a separate program through our Public Works Department, and we also incorporated making connections, additional sidewalk connections, to be able for people to be able to walk to and connect with the park system here. So next slide, please. And then I obviously want to talk about the phase 2 development, which is what we are currently executing. So phase 1 development kind of completed significant portions of the trail system, but we still had few other sections that remain to be completed. So currently, while we were in the design process, we discovered that there were several portions within the park boundary that were designated as ecosystem restoration areas. And we did not want to disturb the natural habitat, the natural wildlife, and the ecosystems within those park regions. So we had to think about alternative solutions to continue providing our off-street bike path, bikeway, hike and bike pathway connections that we had originally planned in the master plan. And so the green dashed line here shows that alternative. We had to look at going up north and along South Center Street into University of Texas at Arlington campus and through the campus areas to be able to reach out and connect into campus systems. So our goal is still the same. We want to be able to get people from campus residential areas and also connect with an existing bike lane on South Pecan Street. We just had to figure out different ways and get really creative about how we can achieve that. I'm happy to say that we are about 90% complete with design. We are currently in the process of running through a few challenges on this project, schedule challenges of executing easements. And while the University of Texas at Arlington sees this as a very positive project, this is a mutually beneficial project to everyone and also to their students and staff. We are continuing to work with them for executing easements for being able to build this pathway, this hike and bike pathway. Next slide, please. And so that kind of gives you an outline, a very quick outline of where we are at. This project is funded through TAP grant, and we have been working with COG and TechStart diligently trying to continue moving this project forward. We are at 90% engineering and design. We have achieved environmental clearance on this project. There's some utilities and right-of-way clearances that we are currently working on, anticipating completing those here in fall, and also looking at letting the project in December or early next year. And that would basically allow us to begin construction on the project sometime in spring next year and running through, it's anticipated to be a 1-year-long project. And so once that's complete, that would allow us to connect significant portions of not only the linear park trail system, but it would also allow the parks to be connected. It would allow the residential areas, the campus, and the existing bike lane on South Pecan Street to be connected, which would be a major accomplishment as a part of this master plan development. So as I mentioned, we are now in our last phase of completing the easement acquisition efforts with the University of Texas at Arlington to complete this. And we are continuing and very hopeful that we can make this happen within the next few weeks here. Having said that, next slide, please. I'm open to any questions.
You have any questions for Vitali? All right, thank you. Looks like a great park.
Thank you.
Right. Every community's approach to planning for active transportation is unique. However, we frequently can learn from our fellow members of BPAC. To provide an update on how one community is approaching their citywide active transportation plan is Daniel Herrick with the City of Richardson.
Thanks, Robert. Yes, Daniel here with City of Richardson. I'm in the Transportation Mobility Department, and yeah, we started this is really Richardson's first active transportation plan this year. We started beginning of January, and previously, more back in kind of 2009, we was kind of our original bike plan, and been working from that. We're really now looking at how do we integrate our on-street bike facilities with our sidewalks and with our trails, and really treating those all as just a greater active transportation, as well as the recreational component, but trying to see it both ways. So you can go to the next slide. As we look at that, we have half associates. We have Christian Lentz as our project manager with half associates. And then they have tool design as well as Lee Engineering as sub-consultants on the project. So we started in January. Kind of the background on it is Richardson infrastructure is pretty good. We're a bicycle-friendly, a bronze level, bicycle-friendly community. Like Gary and Ian were talking about, UTD is a bike-friendly university now. And so there's a lot of good momentum in Richardson. Even looking at some of these statistics we actually have almost 25 miles of bike lanes now within the city. We added 2 miles back in March, and so this number is actually even outdated on our bike lanes. But even you look at our sidewalk number where we have almost 90%, 96% of our roads with sidewalks, and almost 92 miles of trails in the city, and so we have a lot of facilities already. But at the same time, we have a lot of stressful conditions, and even that 4% of roads without sidewalks actually create some issues, especially with UTD and some of the facilities around UTD to get students over there. And so really we're looking at how do we go from a bronze level to a silver level, and it's nice that we have some elected officials supporting that and pushing that also. But really looking at those stressful intersections and trying to make these facilities more in all ages and ability, a network within the city of Richardson. So on the next slide, talking about some of the our schedule here, we're on this task 3 right now, kind of at the early stages, so not a whole lot of information to show right now, but we're looking at existing conditions. I'll walk through some of our needs analysis, but we started in January. It's about a 1-year schedule for us, where the goal is by the end of this year, maybe early January, we'll be able to wrap up with a final report and go to council. So we have a little ways to go, but a lot of progress so far. We have a lot of public engagement and surveys and events coming up this month for Bike Month, and then we'll kind of wrap that up beginning of June. So going into some of that needs analysis on the next slide, we have a few different pieces where tool design is really running a lot of our analysis components. One of them is trip potential, and so they've been looking at kind of our residential areas and how do they connect to parks and schools, transit facilities, retail. One of them we're really not looking at is the kind of home to work trip as far as bike commuting. Our biggest focus is really looking at other things kind of within the neighborhoods. So whether it's going to your school, going to parks, or we have so much neighborhood retail, retail restaurants, trying to connect to those. The other one being with the red line and then future silver line coming in, really connecting our residential areas to our major transit facilities in the city. And so this is kind of a draft version of really trying to hotspot where our trip potential analysis of those major connections that have potential for walking and biking trips, and how we can focus our facilities that way. Then our next analysis on the next slide, it's our pedestrian level of traffic stress. So they analyze our different crossings. So whether it's signalized intersections, unsignalized intersections, we have a lot of mid-block crossings with trails. They evaluated those based off a few different measures of what is considered a high stress versus a low stress. And then even kind of further from that, you start looking at a lot of our major arterials as these major barriers of they're all high stress crossings where you end up crossing we have so many 6-lane arterials that you end up with crossing between our through lanes with our left turn lanes and right lanes. You end up crossing 7, 8, or 9 lanes if you try to get to a signal. And so trying to look at where can we focus on creating these low stress crossings so people aren't just trapped in their neighborhoods. And then on the next slide, going through some analysis, this is when you start looking at what are kind of a low stress crossing, you start seeing that arterial network where we have kind of the north-south Plano Road or Jupiter Road, or east-west, we've got Campbell Road or Arapahoe Road, where we have large segments of the city that usually end up getting kind of trapped in your 1-mile arterial grid, just because there really are no comfortable, safe crossings where you think of someone with kids or someone who's less comfortable walking or biking, getting to this area, and they just not being able to make those crossings or feel comfortable. And so that'll be another push on how do we look at and find recommendations to make more comfortable crossings in the city, to really expand those boundaries so you don't just get trapped in by our arterials. And then the next slide, we can continue some of the analysis, is our bicycle level of traffic stress. Looking at our low stress versus high stress, where those low stress, there in blue, is all your local streets. But then again, you see in the red all those higher level, higher speed arterial facilities. And so looking at how can we create a network of low stress bike facilities and a low stress network. I think that's about the end of it. But those are kind of the initial analysis that we're looking at. We've got one more analysis we're looking at, is kind of an equity analysis or kind of a vulnerable population analysis. That's in a draft form also, where we're trying to identify where are those areas that we need to focus on with additional consideration as well as outreach. And it's an area the city hasn't looked at in the past quite as much, but trying to figure out how can we wrap that into this plan and really integrate that of creating facilities for everyone. And I think may have a few minutes for question, a minute or two for questions if anyone has anything. Like David, you have your...
Yes.
Yeah.
I believe you said it was Tool. Have they identified any ways to get beyond those being trapped by those arterials that you mentioned?
Yeah, within the analysis, they've mentioned Austin as kind of their example. Is Austin has kind of a buy down program where you end up at a higher level of stress, whether it's a 3 or a 4, and it's kind of you create kind of a toolbox of what are things that you can buy that down. And a lot of them, you end up looking at kind of those hawk signals at a mid-block crossing, something like that, where Richardson right now, we only have flashing beacons, the rapid flashing beacons. We don't have any hawk mid-block crossings right now. But it's some of those kind of measures that are much more protected from a signal standpoint. We're a fully protected bicycle and pedestrian crossing versus just a yield crossing. Some of them are going to be very hard for us though with arterials, just by how high the volumes are, where road diet's really not an option for us, as well as speeds. And so there's definitely going to be some constraints and limits to it for us, but there'll be some options to at least make it more comfortable.
Yeah, well, thank you, because that is a pretty common situation, I think, what you mentioned there.
Yeah, Millie, I saw yours. Yeah, these are all in draft form. We're actually probably pretty early draft right now. Probably by late summer, we'll have more final versions of all these maps.
All right, thank you, Daniel. So next up, the Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals, or APBP, is a professional organization focused on advancing active transportation through policy, design, and education among members. Continuing with the next presentation, again, we have Daniel Herrig and then Brendan Yarbrough with the Kimley Horn.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, I'll just kind of continue here, and then I'll hand it over to Brendan here in a second. As he and I have both been talking about, we're both members of nationally the Association of Pedestrian Bicycle Professionals, but within North Texas, kind of the DFW area, there's no local chapter. Even within Texas, there's not a local chapter. And so just the discussion of wanted to see if there was interest of kind of continuing this regional BPAC conversation into kind of a more into an APBP DFW chapter, where anyone who is interested in walking and biking and furthering that can kind of have that discussion. And so if you go to the next slide, just kind of as their kind of objective as APBP, it is that just making walkable and bikeable places. And you can see kind of that sharing knowledge and expertise throughout the environment, where I think from DFW, we have a lot of things that we may not be able to do, like a Portland can do, or your West Coast, your East Coast. I think we have a different context here, and so it'd be great just to get feedback and conversation from a lot of people in the region, as well as across just expertise of planning, engineering, urban design, landscape architecture, public health, advocates, even getting everyone in there. Just to have conversations and lessons learned. And I know there's good and bad of, I feel like we can all vent about frustrations working in that field, but also just be able to share success with each other. And so we're just trying to get interest and see if there was interest in starting a chapter or not. So I'll hand it to Brendan to kind of wrap up here.
Thank you, Daniel. And as Daniel mentioned, I'm Brendan Yarbrough with Kinley Horn. If you can go to the next slide, please. So reason to be an APBP member, this provides a place to network with thousands of passionate transportation practitioners across the country. You have access to trends, news, and best practices, a collective voice on governmental issues that affect walking and biking, and then it also just provides an opportunity for professional development that shares projects, working examples, and then lessons learned. If you could go to the next slide, please. So APBP membership dues for professional is $120 per year, for government, consulting, academic. And then you have a bunch of other ones for advocate, young professional, student, retired. And then there's group memberships, which is 5 or more people from the same organization. You get a 20% discount. So there's the benefit of getting multiple people from your organization to join. If you go to the next slide, please. So why do we want to start a local chapter, and kind of the purpose of a local chapter? What Daniel was saying, we want to expand on that BPAC and just inform that local APBP chapter. I mean, to help active transportation professionals and DFW succeed, grow the knowledge and expertise around our area, and then provides an opportunity for networking and mentorship across DFW. And then there's the outreach and education that the collaboration between municipalities and government agencies. Next slide, please. So here's kind of just a idea work plan of what it could look like. And there's the networking and social aspect of what we would want, and that's the happy hours, the active transportation trivia. And then, we can do some bike rides around different areas just to see how they feel and get that comfort zone. And then there's also the education and professional development. APBP has webinars throughout the year that are great information of what's going on around the country. We can do educational walk tours, walk and bike. We can do speaker series, partner with other organizations. And then there's just the APBP community forum platform for dialogue. So in APBP, they do have a forum where people will pose questions, and then people are able to respond on if what they're seeing in their challenges or how they handled certain situations. So it's just a great organization in order to help build that walking and biking atmosphere. Next slide, please. And then I'll hand this back over to Daniel to wrap it up.
Yeah, and so kind of with that is looking at partnering with other organizations, just kind of, what we would do of, it doesn't need to be a ton more work or time on top of everyone's busy schedules already. And so just being able to partner with other regional organizations already, whether it's Greater Dallas Planning or Texas APA or TechSite, Bike DFW, the North Texas chapter of CNU, just to be able to partner with that and make it easy. And if you go to the next slide, I know I've seen a couple comments in there of interest, but we created a survey. And so if you want to, I think the slides will be available on COG's website soon. Otherwise, you can go to the QR code. We have a survey up there. I'll put the survey link in the chat as well. But just, it's 4 or 5 questions just to see if you're interested. And then from there, if you put your contact information in, if there's enough interest, we'll plan either like a Teams meeting or happy hour just to discuss further. But really today, just wanted to kind of throw it out there as just to see if there's interest, put it out there. And then, just feel free to click on the link and go to there. If you go to the next slide, just wrapping up is any questions, but my contact information and Brendan's is up there. If you have any questions, want to discuss more, feel free to contact one of us. But yeah, I'll put that survey link in the chat here in a second.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Does anybody have any questions for Daniel or Brendan?
Great. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank y'all. All right. Next up, several roadways in Dallas have been reconstructed to accommodate active transportation. To provide an update on these projects is Jessica Scott with the City of Dallas.
All right, thank you so much. Next slide. Just really wanted to highlight 2 projects that we've recently installed. This really got started with another project actually on Richmond, but that project is not complete yet. So I'll talk about an adjoining facility, which is Abrams Road, and Fort Worth Avenue, which has been installed for roughly a year now. So there's a little more to show as far as vegetation. The pictures are prettier. So next slide. There's a lot of lessons learned along the way. So Fort Worth Avenue and West Commerce Street is in West Dallas. You can see downtown to the east. Trinity Groves is to the north off of Singleton, and we're just north of 30 for this corridor. And about halfway through, the street name actually changes to West Commerce Street, and then it continues as West Commerce Street as it crosses the river. So next slide. So this facility is really exciting to me. It connects to existing facilities both on Sylvan Avenue, which has bike lanes and then a cycle track. And then Fort Worth Avenue, which is the corridor you're seeing here to the west, has existing buffered bike lanes, which is actually continuing even further with a project called the Collective. So a lot of bike lanes going in this community, and just excited to see more and more people use these. So as you can see here, we have parking protected bike lanes with bulb outs at the intersection. Next slide. And the bump outs include rain gardens or vegetated areas that kind of differ throughout the corridor. So right here is a rain garden, and there's actually inlets just further cut off the picture. So this one that you're seeing here is actually rain garden and filters water and all of those great low impact development features. And one thing I do want to say is that we've had pretty good compliance with vehicles remaining in the parking lane and not crossing over into the bike lane. In this section, we do have enough space to have that buffer space between the car and the bike lane. So this section is really comfortable to ride and seemingly usable by the community. To the right in the picture is a shopping area. So these are people not only that live in the community and see this every day and therefore know how to use it, but guests and visitors to the area who have never really been here before. Seems pretty intuitive. So we'll call that a win. Something we have identified at this point is the need for maintenance agreements to be very clearly outlined from the beginning. We're very fortunate with this project to have Champions, which actually got this project to the bond previously in 17. But we really need to make sure that those maintenance agreements are in place so that all of these places can stay looking beautiful as they were intended. So next slide. Here's another angle of that exact intersection. We do have that kind of more protected crosswalk and the bike lane that's continuous, like I said, to the west or left in this picture. So it's really comfortable and offers more protected space for pedestrians as well. Next slide. We do have some, this project did not go in completely smoothly. Of course, we had to run into some problem. And in this location, we were limited with our right-of-way. The project limits actually stopped at a match line in the plan set. And so we didn't get all the way to the next block and end seamlessly. As well on the what would be the left side of this picture, which is really in reality the north side of the project. That development that you see will be redeveloped, which would give us the opportunity in the future to actually fully adjust the median that is currently in the middle of the street to give us the full width of the travel lanes, the parking lane, and the bike lane. As you can see here, there's we had to do some field engineering, and really there's no buffer space between where the cars can park and the bike lane. So in the future, we're looking to push this out and give actual space to the cyclists. You can still bike through this corridor, even with these large trucks and their big dually mirrors hanging out into the bike lane. It's still passable, but of course can be improved in the future. Next slide. I'll say actually in that bump out that you saw is maintained by the apartment complex that's adjacent to it. So a couple of the locations are being maintained actively by the nearby property owners. So as we continue down the street, it really opens up, and we're just using the flex posts in the buffer space for the bike lane. And if you go to the next slide. At the intersection of Beckley, this is another one of the locations where it's crossing an existing facilities. Those are bike lanes and cycle tracks on Beckley. We installed the green turn box or bike box to help cyclists get left or right, north or south, whatever direction they want to go. Next slide. This is a part of the project that has been the most difficult piece to maintain. This section of roadway went from a 3-lane undivided to a 2-lane or 4-lane each direction with buffered bike lanes. A challenge on this is that we were limited in the buffer type that we could use. Cannot be screwed down into a historic bridge. So we need to complete a study to determine what I believe it's called the static load of the bridge. So basically how much concrete can we put on the bridge? We need to complete that study before we install anything more substantial in the buffer space. But what you're seeing is 3 generations of maintenance on these flex posts already. We initially started with a white flex post with green tape. That looked really great, but they were still hit. The one closest to you, that's a 2nd generation. It's kind of a dingier flex post at this point, especially with the salt and sand that has been distributed throughout our cold weather events. And more towards the middle of the picture, you have the bright white flex posts that were most recently installed. So again, a challenge here has been getting the study to say what more concrete we can put on this bridge, but for now, flex posts are the option. Next slide. So switching gears over to Abrams Road. This is in East Dallas near White Rock Lake. As you can see on the map, we've got the yellow is completed sharrows, The dashed green is that future bike lane project I was talking about. And on the south side of this project, that is the main Columbia section of this corridor that is being designed currently. Next slide. So this was a 3-lane with sharrows turned into a 4-lane with bike facilities. The bike facilities on this corridor switched about halfway through. On the northern end of the project, we have a 2-way cycle track. And next slide. On the southern end of the project, we have directional bike facilities with a buffer space. So next slide. We'll pause here and say that a difficulty in changing the facility type in middle of the corridor is not only the usability to cyclists, ones that live there or ones who are visiting. It's easier to stay on a facility that is continuous. But also when you switch facilities and they meander or change at the intersection, you really have to understand the extra infrastructure that's needed. So switching to a 2-way cycle track or running a 2-way cycle track through a signalized intersection requires bicycle signals, and signals were not included in bond projects. So we had to procure through additional funding bike signals, which are still not installed, but will be very shortly in the future. Additional things that we've done to this project after they've been constructed is adding additional flex posts to the concrete barriers that were installed as a part of the project. The white ones, as you can see, on the concrete island, and the yellow in the center line. And next slide. Is that on the southern end of the project is directional bicycle facilities. I really wanted to highlight this device that we've been using and have found success with. Abrams Road is, you can see the speed limit's supposed to be 30, but folks tend to travel a little bit faster. Hopefully we're seeing speeds slower with this road diet project. But this device is from Traffic Logics, and it's their cycle lane separator. It has stood up to vehicles running over it. I think our only concern at this point is the white reflective strip on the top seems to wear rather quickly, but we will take that required maintenance over these dislodging from the roadway and becoming a hazard. So we've really enjoyed these delineators. Next slide. I will say a learning point from this project is we'd like to do our bus stops in bike lanes a little bit differently. We're updating our bike plan right now. Seem to be a couple of us in the region doing so. Hoping to identify some updated design standards so that we can keep the bike lane continuous and otherwise provide a safe connection from the curb all the way to the bus, which would hopefully stop in the regular travel lane. So hoping to see those standards identified through the bike lane update. And next slide, I think that is it. See a question in the chat. Someone championed maintaining parking protected configuration without a buffer. Yes, it is a challenge. With limited space, like I said, it was field engineering, realizing that the curb was not moving as what the plans identified. So once they were out there and realized that, hey, this is a choke point, what can we do to maintain this? The option was either close the bike lane or install it, knowing that the area around it will redevelop and we can move it in the future and give more space, hopefully avoiding the conflict of a door zone. Speed. I'm not sure if the top speed that the Traffic Logics separators go up to, but they have those specifications on their website. And I just want to highlight also, we've updated our domain names for our email addresses. So we're officially dallas.gov. That would be the Transportation Department and Public Works updated at this point. So bicycle signals through the two-way cycle track. If you don't want to use the pedestrian crossing signals, because honestly, they're kind of far out of the way. Something that would be more in line with the cyclist line of sight would be a bicycle signal near the rest of the other traffic signals for the regular vehicular traffic. Otherwise, you're approaching an intersection without any way to know when it is safe to go through the signal. That was another question I saw. All right, anything else? Otherwise,
Yes, one question. Do you happen to have included in that project any maintenance budget or otherwise provide for maintenance of that facility, or have you noticed any increase in demand for maintenance along there? And I'm thinking of cleaning the street when I say maintenance, it's cleaning the bike path.
well, I think I'd say we struggle with both street sweeping and regular long lane maintenance. And we do not at this point have any dedicated funding for bicycle facility maintenance. So that is constantly a struggle and constantly an ask every fiscal year. But I wouldn't say these projects have increased any of the maintenance costs or long lane maintenance is annually they have funding, and every time we add bicycle facilities or even do a road diet where we're increasing the, if you close a lane and you're just using striping, that's increasing the amount of striping that is on the roadway. So we just call out that we need more funding to then maintain the additional striping we've installed.
All right. Thank you, Jessica.
All right, thank you.
All right. Next up, the Federal Highway Association regularly publishes noteworthy resources that are of interest for members of BPAC. Occasionally, FHWA will announce national funding opportunities for active transportation in which local agencies are eligible to apply. To provide an update is Millie Hayes with FHWA.
Hey, can y'all hear me and see me okay?
Yep, we can.
Okay, perfect. Wanted to check before I started off. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I have a number of things to go over. It's like they gave me a spot for the toolkit, and then I was like, while I'm here, I want to update everyone on 15 other things. So I'm going to try to keep this in my 5 minutes. First, I'll go over the toolkit, and then I'll go over a few resources and newsletters that we have. And then I have a new notice of funding opportunity for y'all that was just released a few days ago. So you can do the next slide, please, Barb. Just a little bit of context for the toolkit. Back in 2018, the U.S. Senate Committee on Transportation had released a committee report, and it basically tasked U.S. DOT with compiling and publishing best practices for innovative finance strategies, because a lot of locals were struggling with it. So the toolkit was released back at the end of last year. And listed on the screen are some of the toolkit use cases. So we designed this toolkit mostly to serve as a resource for anyone who is interested in expanding bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. And it can also serve as a starting point and a conversation starter. There's a whole section on good questions to ask at the beginning of your quest. And there's also a lot of success stories. And the hope is that that can also help serve as examples to build support for active transportation projects. Next slide, please. So the toolkit covers the key strategies that agencies and organizations can use to pay for and deliver active transportation projects. And the majority, of course, is focused on those funding and financing methods. For each of those sections, Federal Highways wanted to make sure that the strategies are applicable to agencies of any size and in any geographic context. So there's something in here for everyone. The most in-depth examples can be found in the case studies section and in the peer exchange section. And there's also, like I mentioned earlier, a series of questions at the end of the toolkit. And it's really something that we hope that readers can refer to when selecting funding and financing strategies, and just a good overall starting point for conversations internally. Next slide, please. So this map, it shows the different case studies. There were 6 different agencies highlighted with successful implementation of innovative funding and financing strategies. And of course, one of our own Texas cities, Austin, was highlighted here. And we can do the next one, please. So again, these are the same case studies from the previous slide. Again, the case studies vary in project type and funding and financing method, location and scale. We really wanted to show a variety of different projects. And again, there's a lot of detail for each of these case studies, so I urge you to go check that out. Next slide. So within the toolkit, there are links to this table, which is regularly updated whenever there are new federal funding sources. This is just the federal table that you might have seen before. So I wanted to really make note of it. Since this is mainly a web-based toolkit, I wanted to point out that with the passage of, as you know, the bipartisan infrastructure law, this toolkit is going to be very easily updated to address any changes to the existing federal programs. And so be on the lookout. We'll be adding things as applicable. And next slide, please. So again, the toolkit is available as a web-based tool, and it's also available as a PDF, and you can find it at that link. And it's housed within FH2A's bicycle and pedestrian program. I know sometimes our website is kind of hard to navigate. So I'll post the link in the chat after I finish speaking. And next one, please. And so while I had you here, I wanted to remind you that we do have a lot of pedestrian and bicycle resources that are available at that link. Again, I'll post it into the chat. And we also have a variety of outreach venues via quarterly and monthly newsletters and monthly email updates. So I'll post those into the chat as well. So for a lot of folks, if you were already signed up before today, you probably heard about most of what I've been updating on. So I highly recommend signing up so you get the latest and greatest at any time. And next slide, please. So next, this is kind of related to the financing topic. I wanted to provide some new information for the Safe Streets for All discretionary grant program. It's brand new, it's hot off the presses. This isn't necessarily pedestrian and bicycle specific, but it is for safety improvements as a whole and in general. So that should help pedestrian and bicyclists as well. Next slide, please. So for those who haven't heard of it before, Safe Streets and Roads for All, we call it Safe Streets for All SS4A. It's a new major grant program to support highway safety. Grants will support local initiatives to prevent death and serious injuries on roads and streets. So if you've adopted Vision Zero or any of the zero-based safety initiatives, or if your city is considering doing so, this grant program will definitely help you. Next slide, please. So in general, the eligible recipients include those listed on the slide. I wanted to note that state DOTs are not eligible recipients, but they can be really great partners to provide technical expertise in both the planning and in the implementation process. So those are the folks who are eligible to apply and receive the grant. There are 3 different types of eligible activities, so we'll be funding 2 different types of grants. The first is an action plan grant. It's creating a comprehensive safety action plan. And then the second is the implementation type of grants. And you can read more about this in our notice of funding opportunity. So next slide, please. So we have $1 billion with a B that is available this fiscal year. The applications are due September 15th. And there's a lot of information on this website, so I really hope you go there. There's going to be some frequently asked questions that are posted, that will be posted there if they are not already. So visit that website and then email that email address that's on the slide. That is being monitored daily, and our folks are definitely responding to the questions as soon as they can. There's been a lot in the last few days. There will also be slides, recordings, a lot of other stuff that will be posted on that website. So I encourage you to check it out. And one more slide. So these are some informational webinars that are coming up. All of these will be recorded and again posted on that website. And there were 3 webinars that were already completed, I want to say in the last probably 2 weeks. And they're all basically the same webinar, but depending on if you're an MPO or if you're state or local government or a tribal government, there's one of those to look at for each of you. And so for these webinars that are posted on the screen, those are going to be recorded. There's another thing I wanted to mention was to sign up for email updates that are on that page. So if you sign up, it's kind of at the bottom, and I think it just says sign up. It's pretty obvious. So sign up there and you'll get the latest information emailed out on the day that it's posted. And so again, I'll post all of the links for this in the chat, and then happy to help if there are any questions. I'll also post my contact info so you can reach out if you need. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Millie. Like we're gonna hold off for questions now. Get back on the schedule. I know a lot of great information. Appreciate it. Like you said, if you can put your info in the chat and people can reach out directly to you, maybe sign up for some of those webinars. Next, to conclude our local updates, Vice Chair Chad Marbett will present upcoming events and training.
Good afternoon. So I'll move quickly. These slides will be available after the meeting also if you want to reference them. So next slide. National Planning Conference online, May 18th through the 20th. It's in person and online. Next slide. Bike to Work Day is May 20th. Take advantage of that. Try to get it advertised. Next slide. City of Louisville Bike Month celebration. So you can see several dates here, activities they've got. So a lot of good info there. Next slide. Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals. So that's August 22nd through 24th in Minnesota, if you're interested. Next slide. Lots of master plans underway. You can see all of them here. Weatherford is just about to start ours, so we'll add another one to the list at our next meeting. Next slide. And as always, if you have other events or training or things you want to get out to the group, please send that to us so we can include it in the next meeting. That's all I've got. Next slide.
Thank you, Chad, and thanks for helping us catch up a little bit. For our next topic, improving safety for people and bicycling and walking continues to be a goal for both the region and local cities. To learn how Fort Worth is approaching safety for active transportation through Vision Zero policies and a designated high injury network of roadways is Namu Han with the City of Fort Worth.
Thank you. My name is Namu Han, and I'm with the City of Fort Worth. And so I'm in the traffic engineering division, but specifically the neighborhood traffic safety group. So I've been with the city just over a year now, which means I came in partway through the Vision Zero process. But since I've started, I've been able to work on a few different projects, and so I'd like to share some of our experience with you. Next slide, please. So first, I'll just go over the background of Vision Zero and what our goal is as a city, and then I'll go into our development of the high injury network and our data-driven approach, and then further down, to help allocate our resources and efforts, I'll discuss our top 10 pedestrian and bicyclist high injury network locations, and using those, we perform some roadway safety assessments to identify issues and countermeasures. And then I'll talk about how we're funding some of these countermeasures. Next slide, please. So I think most people know of Vision Zero, have heard of it. So, but I'll just kind of briefly go over it. Vision Zero is a strategy to eliminate all traffic fatalities and serious injuries through design, education, and policies and regulation which prioritize safe multimodal streets. And so the basic principles are there are no acceptable levels of fatality or injuries on our streets. Traffic deaths and injuries are not accidents, they are preventable collisions, and the public should expect safe behaviors on city streets. So in November 2019, the City of Fort Worth City Council adopted a resolution supporting the Vision Zero goal and supporting the development of a Vision Zero based strategy and related performance measure to achieve this goal. And so I think up until last year, Fort Worth was a FHWA ped and bike focus city. And so we definitely wanted to focus on that. Next slide, please. So before we developed this high injury network, and we still kind of do, we would just respond to issues when they were brought up by citizens. And this definitely led to a skew in where we were addressing problems. And so in developing this high energy network, our goal is to have a more data-driven approach. And this will help us focus our resources and efforts and also be more equitable. And so this high energy network, so it's a map that identifies where the highest concentrations of fatal and serious injury crashes occur on our network. And to develop this, we worked with a consultant and collected 5 years of data from 2015 to 2019 and geospatially mapped them to represent the distribution of collisions throughout our citywide transportation network. And so from that, there were over 80,000 vehicle, pedestrian, bicycle collisions in that time period. And so the high energy network represents where half or 44,000 of these collisions occur on the network. And this 50% was this was based on what other cities have done. There was no like standard threshold for a high energy network, but that's what we went with. And the crash data came from Chris. And so, like I said, this was to make sure that our resources were being used effectively, but also we want to be equitable. And so I'll go over that in the next slide, please. So this is our map of our all modes high energy network. And so from the 2015 to 2019, a quarter of the fatalities and serious injuries occurred on a little over 3% of our city's network. And so 79% of the high energy network fell or adjacent to supermajority minority areas, or SMMAs. And that means that 75% of that area, I think by zip code, is a minority population. And SMMAs, super MMAs, accounted for 95% of all fatalities, but more important, critically, all of the pedestrian and bicycle fatalities on our high energy network occurred within super MMA. And so our high energy network will help us perform, more target locations where they're to be more equitable, and also it will allow us to perform larger countermeasures. Many times if a citizen complaint has an issue, we would try to do something with either signs or markings, but hopefully our goal is to do more long-term things. And if you look on this map, the MMAs which is 50%, that's in the tan yellow, and then the SMMAs are the blue. And a lot of it's kind of skewed towards the south, but also around the city. But it's spread out everywhere. Next slide, please. So this map is specifically our pedestrian high energy network. And on the left, we have two tables. The top table is all pedestrian fatalities and severe injuries from 2015 to 2019 in the city at the top. The bottom is the same, but just on our high injury network. And so if you look at the map, I think one key takeaway is that most of the high energy network deaths are occurring, within 3 to 4 miles of downtown. And so also when we pulled some further data in 2020, there were 37 fatalities and 69 severe injuries throughout the city, which is a huge jump from what we had seen in 2019. And next slide, please. So and this is the same, but for bicycle high energy network. There's been a few, and in 2020 there was 1 fatality and 6 severe, and so that kind of keeps the trend of what we've seen in past. And on the map, I think it's spread out with the bicycle high energy network, and I think that's expected with how there's not too many bikers, and so one fatality really is a big hit. But it also, I think it does skew towards the south, which is more the older MMA neighborhoods. Next slide, please. So from our high injury network, we chose top 10 locations for bike, ped, and vehicles. This map shows this map shows all of them, but I've listed off the bicycle and pedestrian. And to help choose these locations, this was based on crash density and the number of fatal collisions. And this will help us prioritize our efforts. Next slide, please. Actually, could you go to the next slide? So with our top 10 locations, we performed some roadway safety assessments. And just quickly, a roadway safety assessment is a field-based evaluation of a roadway, and it's used to identify roadway features that may pose a safety issue and countermeasures. And then we also implement such countermeasures to mitigate these concerns. So last year, RSAs were performed for 8 of the top 10 Vision Zero hydrogen network locations with the consultant. And so this was for all vehicle and pedestrian and bicycle. So, and then initial RSA was performed with FHWA NCT COG through their regional pedestrian safety action plan. And so shout out to Millie Hayes and Julie Anderson who helped us with that. And so with these assessments, we will, we're going to take these and try to implement these countermeasures. And so if you actually go back to the previous slide, that'll list the ones that we did. So we did Camp Bowie, and then which is a major, I think, 6-lane undivided Isabel, Long Avenue, and then Eastland with 4 pedestrian, and then Belknap we did with FHWA and NCT COG, and then Allen Avenue, which is south of downtown near hospitals. They added bike lanes a few years ago, and so we wanted to go through and do an assessment of those. Next slide, please, or next slide after this. So with these countermeasures, we're using regular city funds to address these concerns, but we were also able to put up for voting in the bond election 2 weeks ago. We had a new category in the 2022 bond. So this was safety, mobility, Vision Zero, and approximately $5 million was dedicated for safety improvements. And normally with the bond we have specific roads and limits, but this was a very flexible. And so the description was just this. The category may include components from various categories, such as project that includes sidewalks, crosswalks, and ADA modifications, access management, new street lights, traffic signal modifications, pavement markings, signs, and minor geometric improvements. And so, I'm happy to report that the bond passed. So we're happy. So we're looking to address all those countermeasures that were suggested with our RSAs to mitigate these concerns. Next slide. And if you have any questions, there's my contact information, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Namu. If you can drop your information in the chat as well.
Sure.
Anyone with questions, just reach out directly to him. Appreciate the time and the presentation.
Thank you.
All right, so next we have several items from COG staff. And this is the time for the interactive portion of our meeting that we highlighted earlier. So our first COG update will be on active transportation plan inventory, and Julie will walk us through the process for uploading local plan information into the statewide database of active transportation plans. Please welcome Julie Anderson.
Barb, can you actually keep sharing this screen? Thanks, Barb. Okay, great. So I'm here to talk to you guys about TxDOT's active transportation plan inventory. We talked about this with you guys at the November BPAC meeting, and it's now live and ready for you guys. So if I go to the next slide. As a quick overview, the Active Transportation Plan Inventory, or ATPI, it's a map-based inventory of bike and pedestrian-related transportation plans that are published by planning entities across the state. Next slide, please. So the goals of the ATPI are to provide a centralized inventory of active transportation plans across Texas, enable easy access to these plans by engineers, planners, and the public, increase collaboration, and then hopefully facilitate development of safe bike and pedestrian networks across Texas. Next slide, please. So why should you participate in this inventory and submit yours? Well, there are many reasons why, such as having access to examples of plans or goals, actions, or even performance measures of peer cities. You can benchmark yourself against your peer cities. It increases our statewide collaboration, which all lead to better active transportation network here in North Texas. Okay, so next slide, Barb. So hopefully you guys have been able to get your plans ready and submit them today. I'm going to demonstrate a plan submission right now for the city of Denton. They've just adopted their mobility plan. So Barb, I am going to take over the screen now, and in the chat, Daniel will add a link to this submission portal, which I'm going to show on my screen right now. So over here, when you click on the link, you get taken to this page of the Active Transportation Plan Submittal Portal. So you're going to first zoom in to what your city is. So we're doing Denton today. So if you zoom into Denton, and then you just click on it, it's going to pop up that you can update an existing plan that's already there. So you can see I've updated the COGS Pedestrian Safety Action Plan and Mobility 2045. So today we're going to put in Denton's plan. So you've got options for where you've zoomed into on the map for Dallas District, Denton County, City of Denton, or COG the MPO. So we're doing Denton today. So I'm going to click on Denton. And then Denton right here gets highlighted. And then over here on the left side of the screen is where I'm going to enter this information. So I've checked this info with Nathan in Denton to make sure this is all correct. So I'm doing this on his behalf so that we could do it here in front of you guys today. And hopefully you all are going to do it as well. So you got your entity name, City of Denton, that's already pre-populated from when you clicked on it on the other screen. Which department is in charge of this plan? So in Denton, it's the Capital Projects Engineering. Okay, and then contact information. So here we're going to put Nathan here for the contact, since he's the active transportation contact for the City of Denton, and his email. Okay. And then your phone number, so if anybody needed to contact you. Great. And then the plan name, so I'm going to add that here. It's the Denton 22 Mobility Plan. And then the URL, so I'm going to copy this. So they don't want links to PDFs. If there's a URL for your plan, that's what they want you to provide here. And then the year it was adopted, so in Denton it was in 2022. If your plan has a GIS URL, they would like that. If you don't, that's fine. Lots of cities don't. If you've even got like an interactive map, which is what we're going to link to in Denton, you can add that link here. This one isn't necessary, but it's optional if you have it. And then a description of your plan. So I'm going to take this. This is what Nathan sent to me. So I'm going to put that in here for Denton. It's a long range plan that identifies locations and facility types within Denton. Okay, great. So they anticipated that not every active transportation plan is going to be its own standalone plan. Some cities have it incorporated within a larger mobility plan like Denton does. Same with like the COGS Mobility 2045. That's an overall document that has one chapter specific to active transportation. So in Denton, their mobility plan, they have specific pages for the bike plan and for the pedestrian plan. So we're going to put that right here. Pages 31 through 46 are the bike plan, and then 41 through 57 are the pedestrian plan. Okay, so then you can also add tags and keywords. This is so that like when other people are using the system, they can search through by tags and keywords to see what your plan is about. So Nathan submitted the words thoroughfare, bicycle, pedestrian, safety, and active transportation. So we've added those tags there. And then also, what kind of modes does your plan actually cover? Is it all of them? Is it just bike? Is it safety? So you can hold down the control key or command if you've got a Mac to select multiple ones. So for this plan, it's bicycle and pedestrian. And then when this is all done, it's all filled out, you just hit submit plan, okay? So then you get this little pop-up that says your submission has been received. It's going to be reviewed and it'll be published within about 5 business days. So when I submitted ours for COG, I got an email. It was about 5 days later saying that our plan had been reviewed and approved, and we can now see it on the Plan Hub. So if you go over to the Plan Hub, you can see all the plans in the state of Texas that have been approved and are in this inventory document or inventory webpage. So you can see here, Campo in Austin has submitted their regional active transportation plan. Tyler's got theirs, Amarillo, Buda. So if we zoom in here to our area, you can start to see who's been submitted in our area. So I thought it showed up. Here we go. If you click on the map, it shows up. So we've got Dallas County Mobility Plan, the COG Safety Action Plan, and COG's Mobility Plan. I think we also, I thought at one point I saw that Plano or Frisco had put something in here. Yeah, Frisco Hike and Bike Master Plan got added in here. So hopefully you all can start adding this information, get yours uploaded. Hopefully you're able to kind of do it along there with me. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer your questions. Okay.
Thank you, Julie.
Oh, yeah, great. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, Barb. Okay, great. And now I'm going to give you guys an update about TxDOT's roadway design manual and its incorporation of updated bicycle accommodation design guidance. So next slide. So for a quick refresher, Ken Moore with TxDOT presented at the BPAC meeting way back last May, had interim guidance for design practices to accommodate bicycles, and that was expected to be included in the updated roadway design manual. So FHW approved that updated RDM last summer, and that included that update specifically to Chapter 6 and Section 4 regarding bike facilities. So this update includes an emphasis on context in planning for bike facilities on TxDOT roadways, and the districts have been using this updated guidance for new projects prior to this official publication of the updated RDM. So next slide. So we're informing our BPAC members today that it has been officially published online and it's got the new guidance for bike facilities. You can find it at the link on the screen, which Daniel will also add to the chat so you can get to that. So go ahead and bookmark this, reference it as you plan and meet with TxDOT for projects in your agencies and make sure we're planning for bikes on TxDOT facilities.
Awesome. Thank you. Any questions for Julie? All right, next, Connor McDonald will provide an overview of annual updates to the regional database of existing and planned trails and bikeway facilities across the COG 12 county planning area.
Thanks, Robert. Like you said, I'm Connor McDonald. I'm a transportation planner for NCT COG. You can do the next slide, Barb. Just kind of as a background, NCT COG, I'm sure as all of you aware, likes to do annual updates to our regional bikeways data set every year. We're always taking edits or suggestions for things that need to be updated. We're always taking those kind of comments, but every year we'll have to do a big push around August. And we like to use this information for our online map, which is available for the public. And if you want, you can submit a data request as well to help download data. We also use these plans in our mobility transportation plan, the MTP 2045, which is currently being updated and hopefully formally adopted next month, actually. And we only accept locally adopted plans as well, just to make note of that. Next slide, Barb. So last year, for those of you down around, we performed kind of like an online interactive map experience for where people can make edits or suggestions. So you could basically anyone without a GIS license, literally anyone could make a edit if you had a link, and you could add new trail alignments or deletions or update trail names, any of that kind of stuff. And then we would take that and we would update our database based off of that feedback, and that was the process we used last year. Next slide, Barb. So now we got a new process we are considering using. So this new process, which is essentially a GIS checkout process, which is utilized for your GIS desktop or GIS Pro if you have that. So essentially what happens is you just send us an email saying you want to check out our data. And we would provide you a zip file with the necessary information, an ArcMap, and you get a copy of our database. And essentially, you make edits just like anyone, like you would usually do in GIS. You just make edits the same usual way you always done. And then once you're done making those edits, you can just zip the file and send it right back to us. And that's how it works. It does require a GIS license. And some of the pros for this is that the alignments could be more accurate because you're using GIS spatial information instead of just clicking dots on a map. But you'll also be faster if you're making a lot of edits. Hopefully you're not making a lot of edits, you're just making none or one or two. But if you do end up having to make a lot of edits, this would be the faster way to do it. And this is one of the edit processes we're considering. Next slide, Barb. So before we could even do that, we want to do a survey with y'all, and we want to see which one would be better. Would you like the non-GIS license approach with the online interactive map, or would you like a more GIS dedicated software that could maybe be faster or more accurate for y'all? So Julie dropped a link in the chat. Thank you for that. But you can also scan with the QR code. And it's literally just 2 questions, so you can actually do it right now if you would. I'm gonna open mine up. I see we're already getting new responses. That's awesome. Thank y'all for doing that. And again, you can still fill this out later today if you want to. I know we're shorter in time, so if you want to go to the next slide bar, please. So kind of next steps is we're going to, we're going to be looking at the survey results, and we want to kind of just get a kind of tread water on like, oh, what do people preference are? We want to just kind of look at what everyone wants to do. I want to take that into consideration. And then we're going to refine the process, whatever we pick for the August BPAC before we send it to y'all. And then we're going to start doing our heavy data collection in the August, November timeframe and try to update our online maps as well. And those are the staff contacts. Again, I'm Connor McDonald. That's my email address. You can also contact Julie or Kevin. I guess we're going to go to the next slide, which is also me. All right. So now I'm going to be presenting to you our demand zones for walking and bicycling. Next slide. Thank you. So the purpose for the demand zones for walking and bicycling is we kind of wanted to define and locate areas within the 12 county MPO region to have latent potential for a high demand for walking and bicycling. So we're going to find areas where there's already demand for biking and walking. And we also integrated this into the Mobility 2045 update. Again, we're hoping it gets formally adopted within the next month. We are also considering using the demand zones map to locate and prioritize future regional investments for federal transportation dollars for walking and bicycling infrastructure. Next slide, please. So just as a reminder, these are the criteria we use for demand zones. We presented this at some of the other BPAC meetings in the past. But again, we're looking at population employment density, density of short trips, low income densities, density of zero car, and density of high vehicular congestion. But the main focus area is population employment density. That was the heavy weight right there. We're going to go to the next slide. So this is the map we submitted for the mobility transportation plan. Sorry. So we got high demand, moderate demand, and low demand. Again, this is draft for now, but one of the areas that we thought was interesting is this our model heavily kind of reinstated that the DFW is heavily suburbanized as a whole. Although there are certain areas that have lower demand or higher demand in others, such as like downtown Dallas is very high demand, or downtown Denton or parts of Addison and Richardson have high demand. Generally, most of the region fell in a moderate demand category, which is still demand, but not a lot. Next slide, please. And again, one of the reasons why we want to have this demand zones model is to help understand, well, where should we prioritize our funding dollars, because we only have so much money to give, and there's so much that are being planned. For instance, our planned regional VELWEB, which are the regional trail corridors across the 12-county NPR region, there's almost 1,500 miles of planned VELWEB right now. We can't fund all of it. We can't refund, 5% every year or in the coming years. So we need to be very specific and strategic in how we fund these trails and these regional regional transportation infrastructure. Next slide, please. So in the Mobility 25 update, we created focus areas for improving facilities for accessibility. So these are kind of the focus areas we want to talk about, which are public transportation facilities, that's rail and bus transit, destination density of like high mixed use or TODs, employment centers, neighborhood services or local community centers as well. We want to focus on that. We also want to create travel barriers such as major roadways or railroads or bodies of water, which aren't really safe crossings for people, or not crossing, or people can't cross at all. So we want to create safe crossings for across the region. We also want to help support neighborhoods that have been historically or currently transit dependent populations. We also want to focus on areas of high bike ped safety concerns and high rates of crashes. And we also want to support infrastructure that has been highlighted as both regionally significant and also significant in the state transportation network as well. For instance, such as TxDOT's bicycle tourism trail study, which highlighted both of these. And next slide, please. Thank you. And then we have our project schedule. Again, we've talked about some of these demand zones before. We've been refining and finalizing demand zones for a couple months now, and we're presenting it to you now. And it's going to go to STTC and also for RTC approval next month. And again, that's my staff contacts right here. Carmen McDonald if you need me, and you can also email Julie, Kevin, or Carlisle. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Connor. Any quick questions for Connor? All right. Next, we've got Kevin Cokes, who will provide the state BPAC update and a possible statewide funding opportunity to open later this year.
Thank you. And Connor's presentation was a good segue into actually what Daniel's going to talk about on the next agenda item. But I did want to give you an update. As many of you know, Carla Windsor is actually, she's the chair of the state's Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Does a very good job of representing our region. And one of the things that she wanted us to highlight for you at the meeting today is this future funding opportunity that is anticipated to be available from TxDOT later this year. And so the Transportation Alternatives Program funding, as you may be aware, has funding that's suballocated to urban areas of the state, which Daniel's going to talk about in a moment. and a call for projects that we have coming up. But there's also statewide funds that are available. And so the state is currently working on an anticipated call that they are going to launch for what we might call big, very large or high impact projects. And so as you see on the slide here, these are anticipated to be kind of the $10 million minimum range moving on up. So these are really big ones here. The state's currently working on the program rules and the rulemaking for this call that'll be coming up. So that's about all we know right now. But Carla does anticipate at the July meeting of the state's committee that they will know more information, and then we'll be able to pass that on to you with more information here later this fall. And as noted here, it's anticipated, at least at this point, that the call will open in fall of 22. If we go on to the next slide, Barb. We also understand that the state is likely going to be sending out a survey to local government representatives just to kind of gauge the potential for you all to submit projects in this call. So if you would not mind, this is definitely an opportunity where we might be able to partner with you. And so please reach out to us. Let us know what you're thinking about possibly submitting in this big mega project type call with the state. And there may be an opportunity that we can work with you on helping formulate some of those application ideas or materials that you submit to the state. And so that's all I have at this point. That's, again, basically all that we know, but it's a really great opportunity that we think are going to be some really substantial projects potentially could be funded in our region through this funding that's available through the state. And with that, I am going to turn it back to you, Mr. Chair, and then on to Daniel.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Our last COG update is from Daniel Snyder, who will provide a presentation on the upcoming 2022 Transportation Alternatives Call for projects for the North Central Texas region urbanized area.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I hope everyone doesn't mind me presenting about another funding opportunity for the region. So I don't know about you, but it's pretty exciting considering all these funding opportunities. We want to give a brief highlight about the upcoming Transportation Alternatives Call for projects for the region. It's been very popular in the past. We always receive more funding requests than we have available. I do want to include a slight disclaimer. Just anything that's discussed today is subject to change, although this is all stuff that will be taking to the Regional Transportation Council, the RTC, in the future for their action to approve the call for projects material. So staff are currently ironing out the details, but other than that, this is all largely going to be presented to STAC and RTC. Next slide, please. So for those of you unfamiliar with the Transportation Alternatives Program, this is a federal funding source specifically for active transportation. So on this list right here, we have eligible project activities, a lot of infrastructure. The one caveat I will mention is that we do anticipate Safer School plans and education materials being eligible as well. This is very consistent with previous call for projects, so not a whole lot change here. Next slide, please. The number of application categories is proposed to be increased. Previously, we had just the active transportation and safe routes to school categories. However, we'll be including safe routes to transit and a safety category as well. And for each category, each application category, they will have their own unique evaluation criteria. So it'd be really important when we publish the materials to review the criteria for each category to determine which category would be best for your project. If you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to us. However, the category you submit under is the applicant's decision. And with that, talk about some changes to these programs, these categories as well. Safer at School, these are improvements within a 2-mile radius of schools that facilitate travel to and from schools for children. And like I mentioned, new for this call, we are proposing to include Safer at School plans and education materials for this category. Next slide, please. The first new category that we are proposing is safe routes to transit. As you all know, we have a really robust transit network in our region. However, there are gaps that still remain for pedestrians in the sidewalk network that prevent people from accessing those transit stations. So this category really accommodates, its structure is similar to safe routes to school, but just anchored around transit centers. And very self-explanatory there. Next slide, please, Barb. Safety is another new category. There's really been a big push and big emphasis from leadership at the federal, state, and regional levels on safety to address the growing number of pedestrian and bicycle crashes in our region. So just as a possible ideas for this category, projects that could be eligible are those under the FHWA proven safety countermeasures, like those listed here. And let's go on to the next slide, please, Barb. Eligible project sponsors, this is not proposed to be any change there. So if you are a local government or transit authority, school districts, you are all eligible to apply. If you are with an entity that you're unsure if you're eligible, feel free to reach out to me and we can discuss and kind of make that determination there. Next slide, please. So for our call for projects, projects that are within the large urbanized areas are eligible to apply, as shown in this map here. If you are outside of these large urbanized areas, you are eligible to apply under the statewide call for projects that is administered through TxDOT. So every community in our region is eligible to apply for one call for projects or the other. And new for this call is the McKinney urbanized area. We are anticipating that area to exceed the 200,000 population threshold that will be announced by the Census Bureau later this summer. So we will make our call eligible for any communities within that urbanized area. Next slide, please. Good news is approximately $40 million in federal funding is anticipated for this next call, which is actually more than we've had available in the past, which is all thanks to the increase to the TA program under the bipartisan infrastructure law. A few notable changes for the next call for projects are the minimum and maximum awards. So previously we had a minimum funding award of $300,000. We are proposing to increase that to $500,000. However, that is only for construction related projects. We are exploring the idea to have a different minimum for favorite school plans and education campaigns. For those of you that are really ambitious with your projects and have some ambitious ideas, you'll be happy to know that our maximum award for a project is proposed to have no limit at all whatsoever. And with that, next slide, please, Barb. So overall, we're taking this information and sharing it with you to get you prepared for our next call for projects. We want everyone to start thinking about their candidates, what they can do now to prepare for the call. For a infrastructure related project, design will be locally funded. This is largely a construction focused call. And this program is usually an 80-20 split, and we'll share more details about that as information is released in the future. And we can go on the next slide, please. So here is our schedule. Feel free to take screenshots if you like. These slides will be published afterwards. So we anticipate taking this material to the RTC in July. If all goes according to plan, fingers crossed, they will approve the call for projects, and we will be opening on Monday, July 18th. We will hold a public workshop shortly thereafter. We are thinking about doing it virtually and recording it for those that are unable to attend. And with that, the call for projects is proposed to close September 9th, which is Friday at 5 p.m., not a minute later. We're very strict on making sure applications are submitted on time. So please don't wait till the last minute. And after those submittals, we'll do a staff evaluation. And for that final milestone, we'll be taking the list of recommended projects to the RTC in December of 22 at the end of the year. I think I've seen some activity on this side. Transit authorities will be eligible, Tim, of course. Yep, just as in the past. And then 40 million for COG region in 1 year. That is over the span of several fiscal years, Liz. So that is fiscal years 20. I don't want to misspeak here. I think it's 24 and 25, I believe. So that's multiple fiscal years. And if there's any other questions, I'm available to answer any now. My information on the next slide, Barb. If you have any other questions, I'm your point of contact. And if it's related to a category that I'm not involved in, I will be directing you to my colleagues, Aaron and Sean, who are involved in several of the other project categories. Daniel, when will the schedule be officially published? We will be officially publishing it after RTC takes action on the day it opens, July 18th.
All right, thank you, Daniel.
You're very welcome.
The final agenda item is other business and open discussion. This item provides an opportunity for BPAC members and partners to bring items of interest before the committee or to propose future agenda items. Are there any other business or discussion items? All right, hearing none, we do want to take this time to acknowledge recent changes among BPAC members. Jessica Schutt, with the Mobility and Special Projects Manager, is departing the city of Richardson. Jessica has been an active member of BPAC for many years and served as vice chair in 2019 and as chair in 2020. Thank you for your many contributions to the region, Jessica. Moving forward, the city of Richardson will be represented by Daniel Herrig, who you heard present earlier this meeting. Welcome to BPAC, Daniel. And lastly, remember to mark your calendars for the next Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee meeting on August 17th, 2022 at 2 p.m. Thank you all, and please stay safe until we meet again.